For more, Saleem Ali joins me now. He's the author of the new book, Earthly Order: How Natural Laws Define Human Life, as well as a professor of energy and the environment at the University of Delaware. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Elaine.
Well, Professor, first I'd like to get your reaction to President Xi's speech. What stood out to you?
Well, it was a very focused speech on the role that Chinese ecological civilization narratives have played in trying to build global consensus on environmental issues. There was a call for working within the multilateral United Nations system to deal with these issues. Of course, China has a very prominent place within the UN as a permanent member of the Security Council. And there was a call for common but differentiated responsibility around funding. And that has, of course, been the biggest challenge of reaching consensus at the summit so far.
I want to get to funding in just a moment, but what do you make of China's biodiversity efforts in country so far in recent years, and what do you think it's hoping to accomplish in its presidency of COP15?
Well, China has had a fraught history with biodiversity with reference to domestic consumption of wildlife. And in the last 10 to 15 years, there has been a very concerted effort to change that, especially with species like the pangolin, which have been very endangered due to their domestic usage in traditional medicine and so on. And the government has made a concerted effort to invest in protected areas and national parks to reduce that. There have been campaigns on biodiversity protection. The panda, which is, of course, a charismatic species and of great importance to China, has had a come around in terms of its numbers. So there has been progress, but there continues to be concern in terms of the pressures, especially with reference to poaching and so on.
You mentioned the funding gap. Delegates are also trying to set deliverable goals and deadlines. That has been the headline this conference. What do you make of the progress being made these past few days? Is it enough, and are there concerns?
So far, the funding impasse continues, and the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is what is the document that everyone's trying to gain agreement on, the estimates are that we need around $300 billion in annual funding to support the biodiversity target of 30% protected areas by 2030. They're calling it 30 by 30, and that's land and water, being protected areas for biodiversity. And right now, the annual biodiversity funding is around $70 to $90 billion on average per year. So there is a big gap there. Also, there is a difference between climate change and biodiversity in terms of perceived responsibility. With climate change, a lot of the responsibility for emissions reduction has been on the developed countries who caused the problem. In the case of biodiversity, it's more complex. Poorer countries have also been engaging in a lot of biodiversity degradation efforts. And so it's not as simple as to blame the wealthy countries as it is in climate change.
And Professor, about 30 seconds left. As we draw to a close in the next few days, what is the one big thing you hope to see? We know that these type of events come down to the wire, may even go over, but what is, other than funding it and coming to a consensus, what's the one big thing you hope to see here?
Well, I hope that there's going to be some global recognition of what we are calling nature-based solutions. And this is basically a realization that came out of a review that the British government commissioned last year in terms of the economic value of biodiversity. And that if we can gain consensus on that and how we're going to invest based on nature-based solutions, I think it'll be a big achievement.
All right, Professor Saleem Ali, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us from Delaware.